As I had briefly mentioned, this session will be recorded, so we will start right now and we can get going. So thank you all for joining. Thank you very much. I'm really very happy to welcome you to this HDX Datasets deep dive. This time we are hosting the Internal Displacement Monitoring Centre, or IDMC for short. My name is Mélanie Rabier. I work for the Center for Humanitarian Data, and I will be moderating today's webinar. As you may know, IDMC provides data, analysis, and expertise on internal displacement with the aim of informing operational decisions that can reduce the risk of future displacement and improve the lives of internally displaced people worldwide. In our session today, you will learn about the work of IDMC, what they do, how they collect, aggregate, and curate their displacement data, and how they share it. This session, I forgot that. This session will be, since it's recorded, will soon after the end of the webinar, will be available on the Center's YouTube channel. On today's agenda, sorry if we can go to the next slide. On today's agenda, we have some opening remarks by Christelle Casaba, Head of Programs at IDMC. We'll have a quick overview of the Center's work and IDMC's presence on HDX, followed by an introduction to the work of IDMC and the core of the deep dive, the deep dive into the data sets, as I mentioned, how it's collected, consolidated, shared. And finally, we'll have the question and answers. The chat box is already open, so please feel free to comment and ask questions throughout the webinars. And we'll do our best to tackle as many questions as possible during the Q&A. After the Q&A, we will have a very short poll, 2 questions, to gather your feedback and help us improve our future deep dive webinars. So please stick with us and do answer those 2 very brief questions. Now, on the next slide, let me introduce today's panelists. We have Christelle Casaba, Head of Program at IDMC, Sylvain Poncer, Data Management and Risk Analysis Manager at IDMC, and Maria Teresa Miranda, Information Management Advisor, and myself as moderator for today. But with this, I will give the floor to Christelle for the first agenda item, which is the opening remarks. Christelle, over to you.
Thank you, Mélanie, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for your interest in learning more about IDMC's work and the data we produce. I've been working with IDMC for 7 years, and I have had the honor of leading the team in charge of producing all of our data and analysis for 2.5 years now. This team includes Sylvain, Maria Teresa, and about 20 of the most dedicated and competent analysts I have ever had the chance of working with. You may already be familiar with the main metrics we produce, which will be presented in more details in a minute. And these are the number of internally displaced people and the number of internal displacements linked with conflicts, violence, and disasters, which we have been reporting on for over 200 countries and territories for more than a decade. But you may be a little bit less familiar with other parts of our work, which we also produce in my team, such as our analysis on the risk of future displacement linked with disasters and climate change, our measures on the impacts of internal displacement on lives and economies, and our efforts to document successful initiatives and solutions around the world. At IDMC, in the programs team and beyond, we make every effort to produce the best possible evidence to guide the decisions of governments, donors, humanitarian and development partners who can support affected people and help reduce or prevent internal displacement. Our close partnership with HDX has been instrumental in helping us to reach them and achieve greater impact for our work. HDX serves as the primary external data repository for IDMC's data, making our data accessible to a wide range of end users. As the one-stop shop for humanitarian data, HDX plays a pivotal role in ensuring IDMC's data reaches those who need it and can make a difference with it. Since 2019, IDMC's data has been downloaded over 95,000 times via HDX, averaging about 1,300 downloads per month, and almost 16,000 downloads annually. In 2024 alone, IDMC's data has been downloaded over 38,000 times from HDX, which is actually even higher than the number of downloads from our own database. So partnering with HDX has enhanced the accessibility and usability of our data for some of our key stakeholders. We're also very grateful for the continued engagement with the broader team at OCHA's Center for Humanitarian Data and their constant help to disseminate our data and our work. So let me just end by saying that we are very proud to have been one of the very first partners of HDX, and we look forward to many more years of collaboration. I thank you, and I look forward to our exchanges after the following presentations.
Thank you very much, Christelle. Thanks a lot for your remarks and recognizing the long-standing partnership between HDX and IDMC. I will now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to give you a brief overview of the center, HDX, and the IDMC presence on the platform. On the next slide, please. UNOCHA's Center for Humanitarian Data was established with the goal to increase the use and impact of data in the humanitarian sector. It is composed of 4 work streams. For those who do not know yet. So those 4 work streams are the data services, which supports making humanitarian data easy to find and use. It is this stream that manages and maintains the Humanitarian Data Exchange Platform, or HDX for short. Data responsibility that ensures the safe, ethical, and effective management of data. Data science, which conducts advanced analysis and creates insights to anticipate and respond to needs arising from predictable shocks. And learning and practices, working on increasing the confidence of humanitarians to engage with data and make effective use of data analysis. Within the center, HDX was established in 2014, and in the last 10 years, it has become the go-to platform for humanitarian data. Well, you can access the platform via the QR code on this slide or in the link that will be shared in the chat. And on HDX, IDMC has actually been sharing data since our first year in existence, since 2014. You can access IDMC datasets page on HDX using the link we'll be sharing very soon in the chat, or by using the search functionality on our platform, and you will find the page as it is shown on this slide right here. Since joining, IDMC has shared over 400 datasets related to displacement from all over the world on HDX, as Christelle mentioned quite nicely in her opening remarks. On the next slide, thank you. IDMC conflict and disaster-driven displacement data is also included in HDX Signals. Signals is a new product that we offer that monitors key data sets and generates email alerts when significant negative changes are detected. You can subscribe using the QR code on this slide or the link that we will post shortly in the chat. Yes. I will now pass it on to Sylvain for the introduction to the work of IDMC. Over to you, Sylvain.
Thank you, Melanie, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. I would like again to thank OCHA for offering us the opportunity to present what we do in IDMC, and we can move to the next slide. As you may know, our main mission is to provide estimate about events that have triggered displacement due to conflict and disasters. And on this map, you can see that the blue dot, represent the disasters displacement that we have been able to record in 2024, and the orange dots are the ones that are linked to conflict and violence situations. And as you can see on the map, I can challenge you to give me one country where no displacement has occurred in 2024. Now, I would love to present you more in detail the 2 metrics that we are monitoring in IDMC, and for that you will move to the next slide. In IDMC, we are monitoring 2 main metrics. One is the flow. It represents the number of movements that occur during a period of time, but also we can measure that through like a specific event. This is what we call flow, movement of people. And at the end of the year, we try also to give a snapshot, like taking a pictures about the situations at the 31st of December, to give an estimate about the number of people that are still living in situation of displacement. And for that, we have this specific snapshot at the 31st of December, as I just said. As you may recall from the year of 2023, we had about 46.9 million of movement that occurred during the year due to disasters and conflict. And we have approximately 75.9 million people living in situation of displacement at the end of the year. And for many of those people living in situation of displacement, they were living in those situations for some time, years. And I will give you two examples. One is in Japan, after the major earthquake that occurred in 2011, there is still 30,000 people that are still living in situation of displacement. And in Syria, where we could have, for example, again, 7.2 million people living in situation of displacement, where in 2023, we record only a few thousand movements, just to give you the magnitude of people that are still living in very, very disease situation in the year. Now, I will pass the floor to my colleagues, Maria Teresa, that will dive into the data that we have in IDMC, how we collect them and how we share them, and all the product that we have. Over to you, Maria Teresa, and thank you.
Thank you, Sylvain. Hello, everyone. Can we go to the next slide, please? Before we start describing the different core data products that IDMC publishes, I would like to start by giving you all a quick overview of the monitoring process that entails the data aggregation and harmonization of data that IDMC performs. When a displacement event happens, data and information is published in different frequencies, in different types of data formats. The data comes in different languages, using different terminologies, and is also published by diverse publishers and sources of information. Therefore, part of the role of IDMC consists in monitoring, aggregating, and making available a global internal displacement database that allows comparability among different data sets across different contexts and across different triggers of displacement. Once that we aggregate and harmonize all the information in our internal systems, the data goes through different quality control processes. And finally, once that this process is finished, the data is shared with partners in two main data products: the Global Internal Displacement Database and the Internal Displacement Updates. I'm going to describe in more detail the characteristics of these data sets in the coming slides. Can we go to the next one, please? Thank you. This slide illustrates the monitoring workflow. Before understanding the data sets that we publish, it's very important to understand how do we gather all the information. This slide represents the process of monitoring or data aggregation that starts by the backbone team of IDMC, that is the monitoring team. This team documents and collects data on the different publishers and sources of internal displacement information. The team assess or analyze around 252 countries and territories, for which they try to identify and review various reports and data sets to identify internal displacement events, in order to also cross-check the data from multiple sources to make sure that all the information that is gathered is standardized and harmonized. The annotation process from the monitoring team also includes collecting information and metadata about the triggers of displacement and other characteristics that are part of the internal displacement data. The reporting that we do in IDMC is event-based, meaning that we collect information about displacement triggers, the characteristics of these triggers, and also additional information resulting from the displacement events, like the number of houses destroyed or preventive evacuations that may be reported. Another component of the monitoring workflow is the quality control process. The slide summarizes 4 components describing the quality control, being the first one, the system-based quality control checks that consist in automated processes that we have in our internal database that can identify and flag potential errors in the data entry. We have a very robust internal peer review process and post-processing analysis that incorporates different automated checks to flag anomalies and errors in the data. And there is another very important component that is implemented by the monitoring team as part of the monitoring workflow, that is the partner engagement. As we don't collect primary data, we heavily rely on the data and information that is shared by a variety of sources. And we require to get in contact with in-country, regional, and global partners in order to get additional contextual information about the different data sets that we analyze and that we process in IDMC. And another step of the validation process takes into consideration the collaboration with global UN teams from UNHCR and IOM. This collaboration is very important because it allows us to analyze and compare the different metrics that we report in order to try to identify discrepancies, document the discrepancies, and also to try to identify overlaps in the data and potential alignments on the reporting that we do in order to provide the most robust and comprehensive data set. And finally, we also do official communication with governments and the different permanent missions of the countries represented here in Geneva, in the UN in Geneva, in order to publish or communicate to them the different figures and the different analyses that we are going to report on. If we move to the next slide. Thank you. Another component that is very important to understand while understanding IDMC data are the sources of information. IDMC gathers data for a wide range of global publishers and sources, and most of the data that we analyze comes on structured files. And this highlights also the importance of the monitoring team and the aggregation work that IDMC does, as not all the data that is published is machine readable. The graphic on the right illustrates the different types of sources that we assess in IDMC and the main sources of our data. As you can see, UN and different organizations like IOM, OCHA, and UNHCR have represented and represent a very important part of the figures published worldwide on internal displacement. But there are a lot of other data sources of information like national governments, the Red Cross Society, and other organizations that provide a lot of information on internal displacement that is analyzed and assessed and harmonized by the monitoring team in IDMC. If we move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now we are going to go through the transition. I presented you an overview of how the information is aggregated, what are the sources of our data, and now we are going to start to describe our core data products. Next slide, please. The first data set that I'm going to describe is the Global Internal Displacement Database, or GID. This database has been published consistently since 17 years. It has covered 210 countries and territories. Is the only global database that provides a global overview of conflict and displacement triggers of internal displacement, and that also publishes two different metrics: internal displacement flows and the total number of people, or IDPs, or population stocks. These metrics are different but complementary, as flows capture the direction, scale, and drivers of displacement, while the stocks represent snapshots of the total number of internally displaced people. Together, these two metrics offer a complete picture of how displacement evolves, helping to identify immediate needs, anticipate future impacts, but also help us to understand different feedback loops that shape displacement dynamics. If we go to the next slide. The chart that you can see on the left summarizes the data focused on disaster displacement. The Global Internal Displacement Database has a resolution of country level, and we update the data set in annual basis. The disaster data also is disaggregated at event level, meaning that we also provide information about the event name, the event type, or the hazard type. We also provide information about the unique event identifier to allow our dataset to be compared and used with external databases. And whenever it's possible, we also collect information on preventive evacuations. Because something that is important to understand when we focus on disaster displacement is that sometimes high numbers of internal displacement actually represent potential positive outcomes of countries or disaster response systems that are able to preventively displace people before a disaster hits a community. The dark line that you can see on the chart on the left illustrates the total number of people displaced, reported by being displaced by disasters. And you can see that there is a very low estimate in comparison to all the population flows that we record in our database, meaning that our database also shows some gaps on the data available on the total number of IDPs displaced by disasters. The chart on the right illustrates the main hazard types that displace people that have been recorded in our database, being floods, storms, and earthquakes among the main drivers that we have recorded. If we move to the next slide, we can start talking about the next and the second core data product that we publish in IDMC, that is the internal displacement updates. This database provides timely disaggregated data. The GID database, the dataset that I described before, focuses on annual country estimates for disasters disaggregated at event level, but the IDU focuses on timely data that is disaggregated as much as possible. This dataset allows us to provide early awareness during emerging displacement situations. We started publishing this dataset since 2018, and almost 98% of this dataset is disaggregated at admin 1 or a lower geographical resolution. Next slide, please. Thank you. The IDU dataset, as I mentioned before, presents preliminary and timely estimates. And the preliminary word is very important because this dataset represents the first estimates that are available and not necessarily the most robust and comprehensive figures, because these figures may be published months after a displacement event happened. The IDU dataset is updated every 2 hours, at least our API, but this depends on the inputs from the monitoring team. The figures of this dataset are provisional and are refined before being integrated into the global internal displacement updates for more robust and validated estimates, which means that the figures from the IDU may differ from the figures from the global internal displacement database. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the different variables that are present in the IDU API. As you can see, we provide information on the trigger of the displacement, the event name, the hazard typology for disasters, but also we have a different convention for conflict events. We provide information about the geotagging of the displacement, meaning that we provide information on the location, the type of location, if it is admin 1, 2, or 3, and also if this location represents an origin or a destination of a population flow. The IDU dataset focuses on population flows, and it does not provide information on the total number of IDPs. Next slide, please. I would like to finish my presentation by summarizing some of the key points of the different datasets that I described. Part of the added value of these datasets is that they provide harmonized data in a harmonized data in a single database, meaning that we can reduce a lot the burden of analysts trying to compile and aggregate the different data sources. And in addition to that, we implement standard frameworks to enable the comparison of data across different regions, timeframes, event types, and triggers of displacement. And the data that we publish also go through different and very robust quality control processes. And an additional data set that we publish as part of the global internal database is the figure analysis that provides additional information on how our analysts have collected the figures that we report and the different sources and caveats of the data that we have published. Finally, we also provide and we enrich the data that we publish by aggregating contextual information to the different displacement data that we collect to allow our end users to do an analysis of historical trends and to understand the different triggers of internal displacement. With this, I would like to finish. I leave a QR code here on the slide that you can scan to go to our website and to have access to more information about how to access our data, the different APIs, widgets that we offer, and the limitations of the data. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christelle, Sylvain, Maria Teresa, for your very insightful presentation. I saw lots of activity in the chat, so this is great. Now, and for the next 20 minutes, we'll be actually addressing questions from the audience. For member of the audience, though, please do continue to post your question in the chat box, as we'll try to answer as many as possible in the time we have left for this session. Let's deep dive into this question then. So the first one is from Anas, and is the following. What are the incentives for IDMC to share data on open platforms such as HDX? It can be difficult to get partners to share data unless there is a demand from donors. Perhaps, Christelle, you might want to take this one?
Sure, thank you, Melanie, and thank you, Anas, for this question. I'll try to be brief because I see there are lots of questions coming in. So maybe responding with 3 quick answers. The first one is, I think all of us working in this field of trying to somehow inform better response or better prevention for crisis are really in this to make an impact. And it's just standard good practice to share the data that we've managed to access, the analysis that we've managed to deliver, and make sure that as many actors as possible can access this evidence to guide their own decisions, their own interventions, because there are too few resources in our sector to address those needs that the affected people are facing. So if in addition to this, when we do manage to collect evidence and analyze it and publish it, we don't share it broadly, then this is also a waste of resources. So really a good standard good practice that we're following at IDMC. And you mentioned the fact that it may be difficult for some organizations to share the data. And that sometimes donors are also an incentive. And maybe this is just the opportunity to also say that most of our work is funded still mainly by humanitarian donors, also development donors to some extent, to an increasing extent. And with that in mind, we also know that these donors are investing in us so that we can make the data accessible to the widest possible range of people. So that's why we're doing this, and so grateful for the collaboration with HDX. Back to you, Melanie.
Thanks a lot, Christelle. On to the next question. Oh, yes. Do you have any examples of how IDMC data is used? And I think for this one is probably Maria Teresa, you could come in. And we also have a colleague from the center that I think could also bring an interesting use case. So Maria Teresa, over to you.
Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, our data is used by a wide range of end users that go from the from operations. Different UN agencies use our data along with other data sets to analyze and try to identify different patterns of displacement. A lot of organizations have been using IDMC data for anticipatory action analysis, trying to identify how emergent situations also have different impacts on different IDP populations. So a lot of researchers use IDMC data for different types of analysis. I can name a lot of end users that go from analysis, forecasting, modeling, anticipatory action, and research. And maybe one of the use cases of our data as well, at least in the data center, has been the HDX signal. And I don't know if some of you would like to comment on it.
Yes, I would love to. I would love to leave Leonardo come in if you may jump in. I see you're in, no, Leonardo?
Absolutely, I'm here. Yeah, I mean that has been one of the first data sets that we added to HDX signals. I know at some point there was the link in the chat. So, displacement is one of the key sort of like impact metrics that we're looking at, both for, conflict and disaster-induced displacement. And the added value of IDMC is really what Maria Teresa was describing as this sort of like harmonized, and database with a global coverage. So it's really like what made it like so easy to integrate into signals is really like the consistency of the data. So I'm really like this effort made by IDMC to make this data as much as possible sort of like interoperable. And I know all the pain that actually goes and the work that goes into sort of like trying to understand all the different sort of like methodologies and data provided by the different data providers that were presented. But yeah, I mean, through signals is really an opportunity for sort of like making this data accessible also for non-technical users. It's really like these alerts when something relevant is going on. So that's why also the internal displacement updates that are very timely are key. And eventually also we do signals as an opportunity on, to sort of like amplify, if you want, the reach of IDMC data beyond, the data that is available on HDX. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Maria Teresa and Leonardo, for this. Hopefully that answers that question. Next, we have a question from Beth Simons, and it is the following. How do you attribute displacements, or how do you categorize displacements due to slow onset hazards where there could be multiple factors influencing the movement? Thinking in particular about drought. Perhaps Sylvain, do you want to take this one?
Yes, I can start, and thank Beth for the interesting questions there. Of course, in IDMC, what we want to do there is to report the cause that has been put by the main primary data collector. Meaning, if I'm taking the example of Somalia, and maybe Maria Teresa can jump because she was also part of the IDP working group in Somalia to support them to better record the data that they were getting from the ground. There we are just like assuming that what the primary data collector report as a cause of displacement is the cause of displacement. Of course, for drought is a bit tricky because, as you just mentioned, it can be multi-causal. First of all, it's already difficult to put like an event attached to it because we are sometimes have difficulties to know when it starts or when it ends. But of course, depending of the trigger, like the access to different livelihoods could be also be dependent to the drought or access to water, etc., etc. But also for other hazards, we have also some difficulties also for sea level rise in small island states, mainly for another disasters. It's also the magnitude of displacement attached to those displacements, because sometimes it's only few families that have been displaced and they will not make the big headlines of newspaper. And for us, it's also difficult to get those data. But I will maybe let Maria Teresa to complement, but yeah, mainly slow onset are also like a challenge for us to monitor.
Thank you, Sylvain. You highlighted a very important point, is that as we are not a primary data collector, we rely on how the data is reported. So we attribute the displacement type to the reporting terms that are used by the sources that we analyze. And indeed, one of the biggest gaps that we have are slow onset disasters. A few organizations, a few countries in the world report on this type of displacement driver due to the multiple factors that Sylvain mentioned and that you also mentioned in your question, like compound disasters, cascading impacts. And yeah, basically, I would like just to conclude saying that indeed this is a big gap on reporting and on monitoring in general.
Thank you both. And actually, the following question is touching on a similar topics. So from Conan Tippen, around how IDMC collects data under the current conditions in Sudan, in particular Darfur region, especially when the situation is changing daily. So again, around those data sources and sometimes the challenges you might face. I don't know if Christelle, do you want to answer this one?
Sure, thanks, Melanie. I can try. And indeed, I think a lot of the questions that are being asked could be partly at least answered by the fact that, as Maria Teresa just mentioned again, we are relying on partners in the countries, in all the countries that we monitor, to provide us with the data that they collect, and they collect it in many different forms for different purposes. And this is where we come in to try to consolidate this into a format that is then comparable from country to country and from year to year. And this is really one of our main added values. But the example that you're citing here precisely, we have partners in Sudan and in many other countries facing similar contexts. We often rely on data from IOM DTM or from our own mother organization, the Norwegian Refugee Council's country offices are also sharing information with us, and many other organizations, again, that Maria Teresa touched upon in her presentation. So I think it's just important to remember that we have a dedicated team, a monitoring team, that is spending their every days trying to reach out to as many partners as they can and consolidate and verify the information that they're getting from the ground. But it's very true what you're pointing to here is that we have the picture of internal displacement that we can bring together based on partial data that is not always updated as much as we would like it to, disaggregated as much as we would want it to. So we don't have the full picture. But what we try to do is bring together all of these different sources to do the best we can.
Thank you, Christelle. On the next one, next question is quite interesting. I mean, they are all very interesting, no doubt about that, but this one is really specific from Thomas. We have, is there any guidance we could use to improve the data sets we produce to be used by IDMC later on, such as key variables or other standards? So I think that's interesting. Maria Teresa, perhaps.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent question. Most of the data collected by humanitarian actors is not collected with the reusability of the information in mind. A good practice for making the data easy to analyze by any other organization is to document the data. Sometimes data sets are shared without the methodology that was used to collect the data. So having a description of the methodology when the assessments were performed is very useful. OCHA has implemented a lot of good standards that we can use also to share to make the data more interoperable, like adding information on common operational data sets, like the P codes, for example, that allow us to analyze the different geographical regions with a unique identifier, because sometimes one geocoder or one organization will use one name over another. There are typos and names. Also, having a contact person and working on the long-term preservation of the data is important for the data aggregation. And something that we struggle with sometimes is also information about the drivers of displacement. We are happy to continue the conversation later on and how this could be standardized by being by implementing the standards on the triggers and drivers of displacement.
If I may, I can also add a few things there. What will be also very good to receive from people that are collecting data on the ground is more information about like the duration of displacement. I think this is the temporal dimension of displacement is key there. It's not easy to monitor that, to be frank, and I think it will be very interesting that we set up some standards about that, like how often primary data collector must collect data on the ground and for how long after a shock. I think that will be very interesting. The second thing is the where to where. I think we have also to try to better understand from where to where people are moving. Okay, that will also give us like a better understanding about like the distance that they are doing to reach like safe places. What will be interesting to know if from the place from where they move is they are moving with relative, they are sheltered by the government. All those things are also key to understand. And the last thing that I wanted to highlight there is who are the people behind those movements. Is I think something that we are fully lacking is a better understanding about like what are the age of the people, what are the gender behind those people, those movements. I think it will be very important that we also get those data. And the last thing that I wanted also to share is the trigger. I think we are lacking standardization about the hazard. I think coming back from what Beth was asking about slow onset, there is no really clear standardization about like a hazard. I know that UNDR is working with the Science Council to develop what they call these hazard information profiles, but they have already set up approximately 300 definitions about different triggers. Of course, this is not only linked to displacement, that could be also linked to mortality or lost crops, etc. But I think adhering to those standards will be very key, and will help us to better understand where the people behind, where they are moving, and for how long.
Thank you, Sylvain, Maria Teresa. I think there are lots of ongoing discussions with within the humanitarian sector around data standardization, the use of a common standard. So it's a fairly current and actual topic, and links to data quality as well, which is a great segue to the next two questions. I will group them because they're asking on a very similar topic. So they are from Melissa Mubarak and Elia. And the first question read as is, I'm interested in hearing perhaps a bit more detail on what are the types of automated governance processes that are being followed to ensure the data accuracy. And from Elia, it was, what is the quality assurance control on IDMC data? Maria Teresa, I'm looking at you for this one, I think.
Okay, thank you. I hope that they got the question right, but a lot of the quality control processes, as I mentioned, incorporates a lot of internal peer review and external peer review processes. As we are not deployed on the different contexts where internal displacement happens, we relied on the countries that are on the ground to provide us additional information, but also to provide us feedback on the data and analysis that we use for our reporting. Therefore, one of the main tasks of the monitoring team that is very important is the partner engagement. We relied a lot in contacting our in-country, regional, and global partners in order to get access to data, in order to analyze and validate and verify also the information and the analysis that we put together. And as I mentioned in one of the slides, we also include different sessions with global partners from UNHCR and IOM to also analyze and analyze the different figures that we report to identify overlaps or differences in our reporting. I hope that answers the question. If you want me to expand a little bit more, please let me know.
Thank you. Yes, the chat is still open, so in case the two audience members will be able to comment. The next one is from Feleke, which asks, how does IDMC obtain, consolidate, and differentiate displacement from conflict events? For example, in the situation in Ethiopia. Any light on this? Sylvain, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I think I can go back to what we said before is we are just curating, gathering the data that are coming from different partners on the ground. And for Ethiopia, and should I admit that I'm not very familiar with who are the primary data collectors on the ground, but I'm pretty sure they're collectors from IOM or even OCHA are really well present on the ground and are doing those primary data collections. This is why I'm not in the position to reply fully to the questions on this one, but happy to Maria Teresa or Christelle to jump.
Any additional comment on this? I know it might be difficult to have insights on all the specific countries and use case, or if you need me to repeat the question, but if not, we can move along to the next question.
Melanie, maybe I can jump in, try and complement.
Yes.
And it's yes, forgive us, we do not have the exact figures and data sources memorized for all of our countries, but we do have them, however, available on our website. So I'd like to maybe also point our participants to our country profiles on IDMC's website, and there you will find all of the information we have available on the key figures as well as the data sources, so that might also provide some more in-depth answer to the question and other questions.
I will add the link in the chat, okay?
Thank you,
The figure
Sylvain.
analysis.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think it's fair point that when there are very country-specific questions, perhaps the first reference would be on the IDMC website with a lot more details than our panelists might be able to remember top of their head. The next question is from Kuda, and is, what are your perspectives toward protracted displacement and the unique characteristic that emerge from lengthy displacement? And Christelle, if you want to reply to this one.
Yeah, yes, sure. Excellent question. Thank you, Melanie. And this is something we've been thinking about and working on for many years. Sylvain already mentioned one of our main data gaps around the duration of displacement. So that also links back to this question. We don't know exactly in most cases how long people have been displaced for. So it's actually really difficult to even measure the extent of protracted displacement and the average duration of displacement. But you're very right to point to the specificities of protracted displacement and how it should be responded to, and how people who've been displaced for several months or years, sometimes even decades, must be supported differently and through different means, of course, and different funding as well, and aid providers than people who have just recently been displaced. So perhaps I can just here briefly mention the work of another part of the programs team at IDMC, which is the research team. And through that work, we have been collecting our own primary data to try and bridge this knowledge gap, measuring the impacts of internal displacement on people's lives, access to livelihoods, education, physical and mental health, and other aspects of their lives, and as well on the economy for the past 5 years or so. And we've done that in about 20 different case studies. It's still not globally or nationally representative, but it is providing us some initial information and guidance on the types of impacts that we see recurring most often. So yeah, I don't have a comprehensive answer to give you yet, but just to say we're working on it. We have a couple of dedicated publications as well and different projects. And if you want more information, I'd be happy to follow up with you on that one.
Thank you, Christelle. The next question is from Mina. I see we're coming close to an end, so I'm trying to fit as many questions as we can. But Mina is asking, what are the future trends in data collection and reporting on internal displacement? And how is IDMC preparing for these changes? I don't know if Christelle, Maria Teresa, or even Sylvain, which one of you would want to take this one, to answer this one?
I'm happy to jump in. Most of the data sets that we presented today are collected manually so far. However, IDMC is preparing for the ever-growing number of data and information that is available. And sustaining just the data collection as we did it in the past with the new volume of data is not sustainable. So we need to change the way in which collect the data. That's why we are focusing a lot on automating some of the data processes. And we are also implementing different innovation projects internally in order to speed up the process of event identification. So whenever there is evidence of internal displacement coming up from multiple sources, we can identify data as relevant, and we can extract the information as fast and automatically as possible into our systems to be to flag all this information to our monitoring experts. I always try to also, of course, with AI, when we talk about innovation and automation, a lot of people get very excited about the potential of these tools, but I also like to highlight the fact that with more information, we need more people making sense of the data. So that's why even if we are investing a lot in automation, I'm using large language models to process the information and summarize the information, we still need a lot of experts that have the contextual knowledge that can make sense of the data. So by coupling these two approaches, like keeping a strong and robust monitoring team, and by investing on automation and innovation using AI and other tools, we can prepare for the data that is coming. But this information focuses on the conventional data sources. There are a lot of unconventional data sources as well that we need to get better at analyzing. There's a lot of data that is coming from cell phone providers. There are other types of unconventional data sets that could be used for timely analysis of internal displacement. And this is also something that we need to take into consideration when we think on the future and how internal displacement data is going to be collected and reported.
Thank you, Maria Teresa. Conscious of time, we're going to have the last two questions. The first one is from Hossein Meldin, and I'm apologizing if I'm not pronouncing this right. The question is, do you offer training and volunteering opportunities to promote inclusion and ensure diverse participation? Is that a question for you, Christelle?
Sure, thanks, Melanie. Yes, quickly, we do offer on rare occasions internships and volunteering opportunities within the team. We have a very small team, so we have quite limited capacity to take on people in the team and then train them and work with them as we should in these circumstances. But it has happened in the past, and I'm sure it will happen again. We do offer trainings and are very grateful for any opportunity to give courses and help different data users learn and utilize our database, as we're trying to do today with some introduction here. But we have developed more in-depth courses and trainings that we've shared, usually through universities or other partners that will allow us to reach a sizable group of beneficiaries. So we do offer these on occasion, and more often in the context of universities or other partners, as we do today.
Thank you, Christelle. And we have our last question. Just because we're coming close to the end, I just want to highlight again, we're going to have a quick poll that will appear in the chat, in your interface where the chat box is, to gather some feedback so we know if there are any things we can improve for the future webinars. The last question is very timely to actually close, and it came from Damien. And it is how the community could engage to provide feedback to IDMC on the data sets produced. Is there any feedback mechanism where the community could report on events not currently included in the data? Sylvain, do you want to take this one?
It's a very good one. Thanks, Damien, for asking that. I think we do not have yet like a system in place for allowing anyone to provide information about internal displacement that could occur in your village. You know, if you live in a remote area in Uganda, it will be super nice that anyone can report about displacement through WhatsApp or whatever. This is something that is going back also to the previous questions regarding innovation. This is also something that IDMC invest a lot to see how we can improve our monitoring processes, and this one is a good one. It's how we can eventually use, like instead of like the normal, let's call the normal sources of information that we are using, how we can promote like additional ones. Of course, as soon as we are entering in this territory, the triangulations or how we can validate the data will come, like because we and Maria Teresa can also provide some information on that. We are also very careful about like false information that can be deployed on the web and can also give like wrong information. This is why we are very careful with that. But yeah, that will be super nice that on the IDMC website we have like a box where we can invite people to report about like any internal displacement situation that they have been witnesses.
Sorry, if I can jump in to complement. As feedback mechanism, we have an email address in the link that I share. I'm going to share the link again on the chat. but we have data info email address where you can send us questions and feedback regarding the different data products that we have. And actually, we encourage our end users to do that. So don't be shy. We are going to share the link on the chat. If you have any feedback regarding the usability of the data, errors in the data, or ways in which we can improve the data, please let us know. This kind of feedback is highly important. We need to know how an end users or how much our end users struggle with our data, so we can improve the way in which we package and we share our data products. So the answer is going to be on the chat.
Great, thank you both. Yeah, feedback from the communities, from the people who engage with the data is always important and always very useful. So I see we're coming to an end. Hopefully all of the members in the audience have replied to the 2 small questions over in the poll that you saw appear on your interface, on your screen, so we can again take in those feedback as we just mentioned, so we can improve the future of these data set deep dives. I do want to thank I want to express a lot of gratitude to Christelle, Sylvain, and Maria Teresa for their valuable contribution. We have 2 minutes left. I mean, if Christelle, Sylvain, or Maria Teresa, you do want to do a very, very brief closing remark, I'm happy to give you the floor. I know I'm putting you a bit on the spot there, but if not, I'm happy to close.
I think we wanted just to thank, OCHA for supporting also IDMC in disseminating our data product. I think this is really key that we can count on your support. Also count on the standardization that sometimes you want to put in place with the, Maria was mentioning the P code. There is also the Excel tags that you were like also supporting. There is like many support that we get from you that are like incredible, and we would like to thank you again.
Well, thanks are exchanged, because again, really happy to have you on today. I think it was a very fruitful webinar. Thank you again to all of our audience, anybody who attended today, for your engagement and questions. I saw lots of them in the chat. Sadly, with the time we have, we could not honestly address all of them, but hopefully you found different ways that you could get answers to your question based on the answers and the different links that were provided. We really hope that this webinar has provided everybody with some valuable insights and has inspired you to further explore data, IDMC or any other type of data in your day-to-day. I would encourage everyone to visit the HDX platform and the IDMC website. The links have been shared and will be shared again. And again, we look forward to meeting all of you in our next HDX Datasets deep dive, and I wish all of you a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.